What is the strangest, creepiest thing that's ever happened to you that left you saying, "What the hell was that?" Midnight Monster here with another set of stories, and this one is sure to leave the back of your hair on its finest points. Let's get right into story 1. Went camping with the school. Stayed a fairly nice campsite in the woods. The very first night, about 6 of us shared a big tent and we were all laughing and joking as kids do. Then one of the guys suddenly say, "What the fuck is that?" with a genuine look of horror in his face. So we rushed to his side of the tent and peer out into the darkness towards the big communal campfire, and I shit you not, all 6 of us saw what I can describe as a pair of white legs. No upper half, walking around the campfire before vanishing. We were in shock for a while before we all collectively just laughed hysterically while crying inside. Still, to this day, I have no idea what we saw. It genuinely looked like a pair of white trousers just walking about. Someone suggested it might have been someone playing a trick, like say that they may have been wearing a dark hoodie and shining a light on their trousers, but we could see the legs and the campfire over it, so there was definitely no torso. Or in other words, it could have been someone doing a trick. The light and flames from the campfire would not have been visible. I've tried to rationalize it for years. Not saying it was a ghost or a cryptid, but I have no idea what we saw. About 27 years ago, I looked out my bathroom window while using it around 2 or 3 a.m. There was a lightning storm, and while looking outside during a particularly bright, lengthy episode of lightning, it was bluish, greenish, yellowish. I shit you not, I saw something run extremely fast alongside of the road that went past my home. This thing ran razor straight along the white line of the shoulder. It looked like a smallish, hooded creature wearing a cloak. I'm an objective, pragmatic human being, and I've tried to be rational, reasoning with myself that it was a black, plastic trash bag blowing in the wind. But if so, shouldn't have been moving a bit more slowly and billowy, blowing around in the air in no particular pattern? I've tried to consider what I saw was a tire rolling down the road, being forced along by the wind, but wouldn't it have been a bit wonkier, maybe even wobbly? And would it roll at such super speed? This thing that I saw was close to the ground, appeared to be running in a straight line, which I could see because of the white shoulder line, and it seemed adjacent. I wasn't particularly tired, and I had not fallen asleep yet, so I wasn't groggy. I was completely lucid and do not do any drugs. I freaking know what I saw and still try to rationalize it away, but I can't. I refer to it as a gremlin because sure, why not? A small cloaked hooded creature running quickly along the road during a pretty bad storm. Seems fair enough, even if I have trouble believing it despite knowing what I freaking saw. I never tell this story anymore. My husband affectionately laughs at me and people are skeptical, including myself. When I was in high school, my family and I lived in a loft above an insurance business downtown. It was a smallish building, small enough that there was only room for 1 apartment, so we were the only people living there. At the time, I would get up earliest, so everything was pretty quiet, aside from the usual car noises outside. On Monday, I woke up to the alarm and thought I heard a jingling sound. I turned my alarm off and sat up in my bed listening for a few seconds before I heard it again. I couldn't think of an explanation, and I did not have anything with bells on it that I could think of. I looked under my bed, around my room, to see if anything had fallen that would make that sound. Nothing. The setup of this apartment was weird. I had to walk through my little brother's room to get to my room, and so I walked through his room on my way out to the living room and kitchen. My brother was still sound asleep, and I did not see any toys around that would jingle. Upon entering the living room, I immediately noticed that the laundry room door was open. Not like wide open, but cracked open enough to make it obvious. We always kept that door closed unless we were in there doing laundry. I looked around and did not see anything out of place. When I got back from school, I asked my parents and brother if they left the laundry room door open. They said no. On Tuesday, everything was normal, but Wednesday, the same scenario happened again. I woke up and heard unexplained jingling and found the laundry room door cracked open once more. Fast forward about a year later. My mom had moved the stove for the first time since we lived there, and we found cat toys underneath. Cat toys with bells in them that jingled just like what I heard before. When we initially moved in, my mom had found what happened to be a cat litter on the floor in the laundry room. She'd even heard a cat meowing at one point and looked everywhere only to find nothing, and assumed that it must have come from outside. After piecing all this together, we couldn't help but wonder if we had a ghost cat from a previous tenant living with us, batting at the jingling toys and going out to laundry room to use the litter box. The door was open just enough for a cat to fit through. It never happened again after those 2 days, though. Weird. I was walking my dog one day in the park. The park is pretty big, with a lake and a part where the path leads through the woods. Me being a dumbass, I forgot it was getting dark early, but I decided to continue walking. My dog's pretty big and protective, so I felt safe enough. She was walking loose ahead of me. Her collar has red lights on them. When we turned the corner through the woods, it was getting darker and darker, and even though I know the park like the back of my pocket, I turned on the flashlight on my phone. Anyways, a few minutes go by, just silence, sounds of my footsteps in the winds in the trees, when my dog suddenly started growling. I stopped and she was standing a few feet away, just a ring of red lights staring at the trees. I call her and she's by my side in a second. I don't know why, but I dismissed it as a dumb dog behavior, like smelling a rabbit or whatever, and I keep walking. Very stupid, I know. So we keep walking, the dog by my side, my flashlight in front of me, and we turn another corner and my dog starts growling again. This time I freak out a little and look around me with the flashlight. Nothing. It was just a minute of walking before the path led us back to the park. I could make a run for it, but I had this weird feeling, so I took a few steps forward and saw something standing a little away on the path. Just standing there, like they just appeared out of nothing. It was weird and I immediately felt nauseous. My dog starts full-on barking and growling and the back hair standing up. She's a very social dog even with strangers, so this had to be bad. Her barking kind of shocked me into moving, and the moment I grabbed her to turn around to make a run for it, the figure stepped forward. I never ran so hard. I ran back to the little bridge that connected to the neighborhood park. My dog was still with me, thank God. The moment I got home, I called the local police and asked them to check it out. They did not take it that seriously because they said nothing even happened. But they sent a car over. They found nobody, of course. I slept badly that night, and it took me a while to walk there again, even in broad daylight. Midnight Monster here, guys. We still have plenty of more stories to come. If you're enjoying today's content, go ahead and support the channel by smashing that like button and subscribing to the channel. Here on Midnight Monster, we post daily videos of the most gruesome, unexplained, paranormal, and stories that are just downright freaky. Oh, I've got a couple stories for you. Number 1. As a kid, I was always paranoid about leaving my window open at night in the summer, even though I lived in a rural area away from people. We did not have AC and it was unbearable otherwise, so I caved and cracked it open. I woke up one night and looked out the window to see a pair of glowing green eyes staring down at me. I don't know what kind of animal it was, but it darted away as soon as I screamed. Freaked me out so much I slept with the window closed for 2 weeks and suffered. Story 2. Heard a woman whisper in my ear while laying down in bed as a child. Crystal clear voice. Sounded like she was right next to me, but there was no one in the room, as I was home alone and it wasn't my mother's voice or her girlfriend's voice. It said, "Don't be afraid." And the final story I have for you. I worked as a park ranger, and the weirdest thing was finding a shrine in the park before opening that had not been there the night before. Even weirder, it consisted of fried chicken and a wheelchair. I'm not joking. There were several buckets of fried chicken, fast food, easy meals placed strategically in a circle, with a new wheelchair smack in the center. The park closes after dusk and it's very outdated, so definitely not ADA friendly. Plus, the only way to get into the park after the gate closes is to either squeeze past a couple of boulders or take a boat and come here off the lake. My boss and I got creeped out and kept the wheelchair and lost and found for a while, but no one claimed it. I was 16 and living in a rural area between New York State and Pennsylvania. On the New York side, I knew a girl who lived out in the boonies on the Pennsylvania side. 3 or 4 miles away at that. She wanted me to sneak into her room that night. Me being, the teenager I was, I ventured out on foot. She lived on a hill with a dirt road, and you had to walk up a dirt road through a heavily wooded area. On the way up, you can see significantly better than on the way down, because of how the end of the woods faced the direction of the moon at night. Walked to her place without a hitch. It was in the early morning that I began walking home through the pitch-dark woods. Thus, that's where the trouble began. The stretch of heavily wooded area went for a mile or so, at the end of the clearing with a light attached to someone's shed nearby. As I was walking on this barely visible road, I heard a rustling, which is normal when you're out in the woods at night. I wasn't alarmed at the rustling, but more so at the fact that I heard something getting closer to me, and it began screaming. Soon enough, this blood-curdling screeching was right next to my left ear. I was terrified and could not bring myself to stop or look to the side. I could only keep a steady pace and push on. I remember thinking that I had to just keep moving. Eventually, the screaming was directly behind me, and then shortly after that, it was far away. I never once looked back, and as soon as I got to the light that signaled the clearing, I ran home. I never really gave much thought to it in the following years except for a story that I'd tell around campfires. Some suggested it was a fox in heat, and I considered that explanation to make a fair amount of sense. However, one night, I was browsing some logical legends and ghost stories on the interwebs when I found a legend for the area that I had walked through. Many people have reported hearing screamings when walking through the same area. The story said, and many reported, these things happened particularly in the woods. So, I did what any sane person would do and called that my signal that I had enough of the internet for the night, and went to bed just a little more nervous than usual. I feel stupid for even writing this, but I feel like it needs to be told, in case someone can explain. A few years ago, my boyfriend and I went to go hiking in the Pescadero Woods, Northern Cal. We ended up getting lost and not getting there till about 3:30. It closed at 5, so we decided to smoke a little before and end the walk. Mind you, this is nothing new to me, and I have been smoking for the previous 6 years constantly. So, we began our hike, and multiple trails were leading to an abundance of hiking options. Right away, I feel completely wrong. I have an overwhelming sense of dread to the extent I can't even put out words and explain them to my boyfriend. Over an hour, we end up at a bench. Doesn't matter what trail we take, how far we walk, again and again we come to that same bench. At this point, I start expressing how the situation doesn't make sense, and I would like to go back now. We walk a little further and see a water fountain. My boyfriend runs up to it, maybe 20 feet away, and turns to face the other trail. When I look down this trail, I see a deer, about 15 feet in front of me. I put deer in parentheses because this was anything but a deer. I've been trying to find the words since then on how to explain this situation, but the best I can do is this. I looked at this thing and I was like, my mind was telling me it was a deer, but every gut feeling and internal reaction was convinced I was looking at something that wanted me to think it was a deer. It was so wrong. I could not honestly comprehend what I was seeing. Again, I was 15 feet away, so that should not have been an issue. After staring for about 2 minutes and motionless, I called my boyfriend over because at this point, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. Nothing made sense in what I was seeing, so I called him over to get his trailhead and said, "What do you see?" He responded, "I think it's a deer, but it's not right." Then he proceeds to walk forward towards it. When I say my heart dropped, I kid you not, I freaked out. I grabbed him by the shirt and told him to walk to the car and not turn around. On the way home, I asked him what he saw, and he said, "It was supposed to be a deer, but it wasn't." I did an art show in Coventry, UK, at an old building that used to be where the ska band, The Special, rehearsed in the damp, graffiti-stained basement. If you're from Coventry or even into the two-tone ska movement, then you know exactly where I'm talking about. It was late November or early December, and I was in busking band playing Christmas songs while people came to look at the installations inside. That night, a paranormal experience team was holding a free session after the event, so myself and my girlfriend did tag along. We're not firm believer in ghosts, ghouls, and demons, but we do like horror movies, and we've never done one of these things, so it sounded fun. We explored the whole building, feeling for cold spots and energy. This place is massive with 3 or 4 floors, and upstairs are all art studios, so they are vast, untreated, and it was going well. We and the team had decided that one of the rooms upstairs had a feeling about it, and of course, we had not been into the basement yet. At this point, we split into groups in half, 2 teams. One team would go to the studio upstairs that had a weird feeling. The other would go down to the basement. We would then swap. We were in the basement first, where we led down the stairs and, armed only with torches, began to explore the dark, cold, wet rooms. The team told us it used to be a youth center, so they tried holding hands and talking to the space to see if they could get any response. All quiet. Nothing. It was windy that night, so we'd get the occasional leaf sweeping past the window, but generally it was a disappointing response. During one of these communication exercises, I was drawn to a long, dark corridor that had small rooms on the right and led to a stairway on the left. I did not separate from the group, but someone kept looking me back into the dark void. After a few attempts and a few jokes made about the lack of activity, it was at this point we decided to swap the teams around. As people made for the doors at the far end of the room, I took one more look into this corridor where I saw, or thought I saw, or maybe even imagined, a young chap wearing blue jeans, white trainers, and a white t-shirt. He was blonde and had a noticeable silver chain around his neck, and he wore over his shirt as a sort of statement. I can still remember his stance and everything. It was surreal and spooked me out a bit. At the time, I just convinced myself that my brain had just filled in space. I was told it was a youth center, so my brain, desperate for a result, after a few hours in the dark, just put a young man in the darkness. I thought about bringing it up at the end, should we talk about our findings, but wasn't sure if I should. We went upstairs, which had a few noise answerings or responses. They could have been the sound of radiators or old pipes, but it was fun and eerie at the same time. We all met up again in the main reception room downstairs to conclude the evening. The usual speeches of, quote, "Join us again, discounts, blah blah blah," was most of this, but just before leaving they asked for any final thoughts. I had said to myself that what I saw was probably nothing. It was late, let's get home kind of attitude. That was until a middle-aged lady of the group said she was sure she saw a tall chap in white downstairs. I tuned into every word. He had white shoes and was just peering around a corner in the basement by the long stairway. She continued to say that she would not have even noticed him if it wasn't for a silver necklace shining around his neck just as she was leaving. I did not tell anyone that night what I saw, not even my girlfriend. There's no way the mediums or paranormal team could have constructed this for a result, while we swapped locations. That was a creepy day for me. I haven't had any chance to go back there since, but do park along the road when visiting shops nearby, and am often remembered of the figure in dark corridor and how strangely described the same thing from a separate group. Sleep well, guys. This is back in Mexico when I was close to 6 years old. In small towns in Mexico, it's common that the bathroom's detached from the home sometimes, like in our situation, in a room on top of the roof. Roofs in Mexico are usually flat cement roofs. The rule in my house is if you have to pee at night, you have to go pee on the lawn. Don't wake mom up unless you have to go number 2 when she'll take you upstairs. Well, on this day, I went out to pee and I'm a girl, so I'm squatting. I look up and see a light floating above my roof. I thought it was a street light at first, but it starts moving closer and closer to me. I start panicking, but I immediately reacted, frozen. I could not move. I was in complete shock. Suddenly, I felt something tell me to move. I say felt because it wasn't like I heard it, but more like a knowing. Run, move, get out. I remember running to my room while my pants were still wrapped around my ankles. I couldn't sleep all night. The next day, I remember telling my cousins about it. They all said it was probably a witch. I did not tell my parents because that house was also haunted as heck, and I already knew that the response I would get, "Oh, it's nothing." After this, I wet the bed until I was around 8 or 9, even after I moved to the United States. I used to think it was some kind of ghost, but I'm also learning now towards a UFO. Although every day on a Wednesday at the same time, you could hear what sounded like a rock hit the roof, and then roll the entire roof from one end to the other. So, maybe it was just my haunted ass roof. Have security cameras been installed a few years ago after someone attempted to break into the back door? The door itself is steel, and the doorknob is one of those that had a keypad with an actual keyhole above it in case the keypad quits working. They fucked up the keyhole and even pulled out the pins, but the door stayed locked. The cameras were put up for about a couple of years, nothing of interest aside from a fat-ass possum who loves to hang out by the carport. That is, until about 3 in the morning one night. The camera sees me outside. I'm doing my usual nightly things. I'm a total night owl, and I'll go outside periodically throughout the night to walk around the property. I head inside not even 10 minutes after coming in. I'm not joking, it happened that fast. A beige Tahoe towing an empty trailer shows up. It approached not from the road, but from a field behind the property. The Tahoe stops right at the back door, and 2 men come out. The driver hides out of sight from the camera. The passenger is wielding a big hunting knife. He was hiding it behind his back, and he knocked on the door. To make matters worse, they were hiding in the field behind the house as said earlier. They had to have seen me as there's nothing in the field. They also have to have been hiding with their lights off and the engine off for a while, as I was outside for almost a full hour. I would have easily noticed the lights or the sounds of a car engine if they weren't supposed to be there. There was no telling exactly how close they were to me in that field, as the time there was no lights on the area. I also did hear the knocking. No one else in the house did, as I was the only one awake at the time. The knocking was quite loud, frantic sounding in fact, and lasted for at least a couple of minutes. I did not answer it, as I just never answer the door after dark, unless I'm specifically expecting somebody. I honestly still think about what would have happened if I was expecting someone. To watch the exact situation unfold on security cameras the next day was honestly scary, and put into perspective exactly how close I was to likely being murdered. Especially considering that the men did not try to force entry. They simply gave up and left. Midnight Monster here. That was 10 stories of very creepy situations. If you enjoyed today's content, show the channel some love by smashing that like button, and just know, Midnight Monster has daily videos, so I hope to see you in tomorrow's. See ya.